Hi folks, Florida Man here. I wasn't doing too much on a certain Thursday evening, and I happened to be aware that there's a certain person who organizes 5-minute turn games on Backstabbr periodically. I believe he's doing it just to create games that have less of a time commitment, and that aspect of it seemed intriguing to me since recently I've been quite busy. So I thought it would be interesting to try a game with 5-minute turns. And as it happened, a position opened right up just for me. I was assigned to play Italy. Spring 1901. I began by messaging Austria, Russia, and France. That's the typical way I prioritize things as Italy in games like this, where there's a really short time frame in which to negotiate. Unfortunately, neither Austria nor Russia responded to me before the deadline. France proposed the usual peace in the Southwest agreement, which seemed necessary and logical to agree to, whether or not either of us would then violate it. Since Austria was radio silent, you see that I moved Venice to Trieste in an effort to increase my leverage and possibly gain an early fifth center. Other than that, I think my moves are pretty standard. I didn't actually expect to gain Trieste, or I would have moved Rome to Venice as well, but Austria moved in a very strange way, so I end up landing there. Fall 1901, Austria decides it's in his interests to start talking to me. At first he responds to the proposal that we work together against Turkey, by claiming that he already has a non-aggression pact with Turkey. After a little argument from me, he relents and he says he'll let me into Serbia if I'll abandon Trieste. I frankly don't believe him, because the way Austria has been expressing himself makes it difficult to put any weight on anything he says so far. As a result, I propose an alliance against Austria to Turkey. Although Turkey isn't much of a communicator, and he makes vague pronouncements instead of directly answering my questions, I decide to work with him to the extent that's possible for now, and hopefully I can team up with Russia against him after Austria's gone. For these reasons, my fall orders are basically oriented toward gaining at Austria's expense, and nothing else. Austria NMRs, as well as being flaky in communications, which just affirms my determination that he's not a reliable partner. Unfortunately, because of the 5-minute turns, you can see that actually 4 of the 7 powers NMR. This, along with other factors, gives me reason to feel that 5-minute turn games are not actually a great idea. Even another 2 to 5 minutes would make it a much better idea, though, in my opinion. In the build phase, I build an army and a fleet. France builds 2 fleets, which is worrying, Germany builds a fleet, and Turkey builds an army. Frankly, the Turkish and French builds make me feel much better about collaborating a bit with the Turk, and a lot more uneasy about France. At the same time, the fact that Russia and Turkey have been friendly this whole time is not lost on me. Hoping to win Austria as a temporary ally and possibly weaken Turkey, I start a group chat with Austria, Germany, and myself about how to take the juggernaut down. Spring 1902, the moves you see are actually coordinated between Austria, Germany, and me. Austria proposes that I move to Serbia to bounce any attack on that space, Germany warns that France is coming after me, and Austria and I have a miscommunication about which of us is to occupy the Ionian Sea. Although our movements aren't totally effective, we're fortunate that Russia misses orders again. Turkey, however, is paying plenty of attention, and takes Greece with a convoy. Fall 1902, the Juggernaut advances against us, I lose Serbia, and I lack the leverage to make any advance against France successful yet. In the build phase, I build the destroyed army from Serbia, and France and Turkey build themselves more fleets, which bodes very ill for me. Spring 1903, I send my first message to Germany individually. I ask him about possibly giving me some help against France, or joining in more in the fight against the Russian menace, and Germany indicates he'll move against Russia. The move to Vienna was something I proposed in the group message with Austria and Germany, both to protect Vienna from Russia, and secretly to hopefully get it for myself. Unfortunately, although my schemes to take over Austria semi-covertly are successful for this season, we're also losing ground to the hostile Turks, and I'm gaining nothing relative to France. The only bright side in the West is that France continues to devote 3 units to fighting England, even though the English player has not entered orders since spring 1901, and England could therefore be conquered with just 2 units. This is a mistake I would not have made, I think. In fall 1903, France breaks into Piedmont, but also moves into Burgundy, which I believe will bring the Germans onto my side in the anti-French war. Austria tries to support Vienna into Galicia, which would have worked if I was actually willing to leave the Austrian center I was occupying to attack Russia. Instead, I support Trieste to hold, in part because I knew Turkey was more of a threat at that moment than Russia, and then I claim a misunderstanding. As a result, we hold our own fairly well against Turkey, and Austria drops down to a single unit. Unfortunately, I missed the build phase, so I didn't get an additional unit to deploy against either France or Turkey. On the brighter side, Turkey misses Spring 1904, and so does France. We're really starting to see the downside of running a 5-minute turn game, eh? England didn't issue orders after Spring 1901, Russia has been unreliable for years at this point, and even France and Turkey, who have been doing so well, will occasionally miss seasons. As do I, despite the fact that I was planning on making a video about this game from the time I decided to enter it. And having to say that I forgot to enter orders is a little embarrassing. In fairness, I think I was eating dinner and watching television for part of the time I was playing. Going to fall 1904, the moves that Germany had begun to make in spring, repositioning to fight France rather than go after Russia further, turn into outright hostility, which is great for me. Although France is still striking against me, his moves for that purpose this season are not effective, because I win the guessing games we're playing. I convoy directly into Spain, which he is not defending this season, and because France has a fleet in Piedmont rather than an army, I don't need to defend Venice. Turkey moves into the Ionian Sea, but I'm in great shape to defend against him, and at the same time that Turkey did that, Russia is beginning to attack them. In the build phase, I get a fleet and an army. France's destroys show that he has decided to throw as much of his stuff to Germany as he can, which presents a probable issue for me in the future. However, despite the 5-minute turns, I suspect I can organize the effort to prevent the German solo without too much trouble, even if Germany gets all of England and most of France and St. Pete. Spring 1905, I take the Ionian Sea back. At this point, I am negotiating with Russia, and Russia actually enters support for me to take Budapest, which I unfortunately did not take at this point. France retakes Spain from me, which I had planned for, but unfortunately I missed the retreat phase, so that unit gets destroyed instead of going to Portugal or Marseille or Gascony. Fall 1905, my Russian ally NMRs again, and unfortunately most of my moves bounce, while Germany successfully advances against France. In the build phase, Germany gets a new fleet, bringing his navy up to a commanding 3 fleets. Turkey gets a new army, which I understand, because that might help both in fending me off and in fighting Russia, who is in Armenia. Spring 1906, I take Russian support and finish Austria off, and I also advance into Gulf of Lyon, while Germany likewise advances against France. Fall 1906, I take Spain again, although it's only because France didn't support it this time. That's despite the fact that France didn't actually NMR. The only reason I can think of for this failure is that the 5-minute turns really kept France from thinking all of his moves through. At this point, it's clear he's going to collapse, so there's not much reason for France to be investing much energy in this game, but he had been largely consistent so far, so this oversight is a little bit surprising. In the build phase, I get another fleet and another army, as has been my habit so far, you may have noticed, while Russia and Germany each get an army. This reflects the fact that the 3 of us now have to worry more about each other, rather than our enemies from before. Fortunately, as you'll see with the subsequent seasons, Turkey is no longer fighting very much, and he's not capable of doing much either without me distracted by France or Russia NMRing. So by the end of 1907, Turkey is down to 3. As 1908 proceeds, France and Turkey pretty quickly disappear completely, leaving only the 3 great powers alive. As 1909 begins, Germany makes their bid for the solo, but despite Russia and I butting heads briefly in Serbia, we also both move to try and stop Germany, and the 3 of us end up agreeing to draw at this point, causing the game to finish as the phase changes from spring to fall. So what did I learn from trying a 5-minute turn game? First of all, that amount of time is not enough for people to negotiate and make plans with other players. The amount and quality of communication clearly, noticeably, and probably measurably suffered relative not only to normal turn-length games, but also to 15-minute turn games, which are how long live game turns normally are. Second, when you play 5-minute turn games, it seems as if the thing that decides the game is mainly actually putting forward effort rather than employing a ton of strategy. If you just make sure to message people, they'll be more likely to ally with you than with the people who are almost silent, which is pretty obvious. The amazing thing, though, is that I could get away with essentially attacking my ally, Austria, and absorbing all of Austria's home centers by the end, in large part because Turkey was also attacking Austria and never tried to make a common cause with them. Turkey's near radio silence also meant that Russia turned on them as soon as Austria was gone. Third, although the communication was sparse, the messages in this game clearly mattered a great deal. I have no doubt that my moves were sometimes communicating one thing, which my words then clarified and smoothed over. I am certain the way this game went is not the way a gunboat game would have gone. I was able to attack Austria in spring 1901 in this game, and Austria also moved units toward me at the same time. But despite that early hostility, we were able to quickly patch things up and work together against Turkey. All it takes is a few words, if they seem credible, to turn the tide of a game. However, the main thing that I took away from this is that a game that's this quick, or that doesn't have communication in it, does not feel to me like diplomacy at all. It feels more like a watered-down version that loses most of its color, and frankly, its soul. I don't want to knock Gunboat, because it's a game of its own that clearly has a critical element of tactical and strategic skill, as well as non-verbal communication. At the same time, though, after playing a game that was so quick that I didn't have time to communicate very much, I almost feel as if a game with no communication at all should have a different name. I hope you liked this video, and found it entertaining. I'd like to briefly thank the people whose names now appear on screen, who are responsible for preparing the subtitles we have on the videos that have them. They've prepared more subtitles than I've even been able to adequately add so far, and they are a very helpful bunch of hobbyists. If you like what we're doing here at Florida Man Diplomacy, you too can support it by liking, subscribing, and commenting below. And if you feel like you're really getting a lot of value from the channel, I hope you'll consider visiting my Patreon or Ko-Fi. My blog, Discord, Patreon, and Ko-Fi are linked below. Until next time, Florida Man out.